The call volume at the $19 strike price for Palantir is something that I've really never seen before. The amount of implied volatility that we've seen for end of day expirations today is pretty mind-blowing. And in terms of the buying pressure that we have, not just coming into the stock market after the recent announcement from the Fed that they will be cutting rates next year and into 2025, we see a lot of buying pressure coming into Palantir. And I think what we do need to analyze is how this company is doing right now, because in a few short weeks, we're going to be entering the new year. We're going to be talking about some of the best stocks for 2024. And I think Palantir can easily stay on that list for one of the top AI stocks. So before we get too far, hit that like button, subscribe for daily videos. Of course, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just collecting on the data and dispatching it to you. Now, pop it up on the screen here. What we do have, like I said, is Palantir sitting at about 1821 before this market opens here, and is doing well in terms that they were able to build and hold that support at the 17s, which is important in terms if there's any type of correction or bearish correction here in the near future. But what Palantir will need to test here in the future is this $20 resistance line. And this isn't just a physical resistance point in terms of trading history and patterns. It's also a psychological resistance point. But remember, Palantir was able to hit that 2185 in the recent future. Quickly here, looking at the options contracts at that $19 strike price for expirations here just at the end of the day, we have 71,000 in terms of call volume. This is really showing that a lot of people are taking a bet that Palantir will be increasing in valuation by the end of the day in terms of trading volume, sitting here at 67 million. So there's a lot of buying confidence coming into the stock. We've had recent partnerships. We're going to be talking about how they're doing in terms of year-over-year growth and what the next quarter expectations really are for Palantir. And Seeking article has a great article here. Seeking Alpha, has a great article here that really breaks this down, talking about how Palantir has one of the most important factors and variabilities to a company's success, and that's customers at the table. Remember that the AIP Bootcamp, if you guys aren't familiar with that, which is a newer data analytics software that Palantir is allowing possible to clients to test for free, is bringing a lot of customers to the table. Nearly 300 organizations have already used AIP, and that's an attach rate of about 90%. And we've seen Palantir and even top head honchos from Palantir saying that there's a lot of people that are at the table waiting to utilize this software. Now, what we have seen in terms of Q3 earnings was a large flip in the outlook of this company. Remember, after those Q2 earnings were released, we did have that big drop, almost nearly a 25% correction in Palantir after we saw that only 13% of year-over-year growth. That quickly flipped in Q3 right here after we had that 17% year-over-year growth and the revenue of $558 million. A lot of hopes did come back into this company. And what you do see in terms of revenue is this consistent and linear and stable growth among the following quarters over the previous 2 years. Yes, you do see a decrease in the actual year-over-year growth in terms of revenue percentage or actual percentage, but this can just insinuate maturity within a company and also Palantir getting out of that really hyper growth in early stages. Now, talking about that in terms of one of the biggest revenue, components for Palantir is the governmental contracts. And remember, what we do have and what we've had recently with bearish media articles is this William Blair, basically the analyst, talking about the friction with this U.S. Army data ownership. And we've talked about this, that this article was posted many times over and over again, saying that they predict a reduced 2-year contract less than a current of 116 million annually, when currently it sits at about a 4-year worth about 485 million, because possible vendors are at the table, which basically insinuates competition. However, I think in terms of government revenue, I don't think it's horrible to see this kind of decreasing at a year-over-year growth. And that's because if we go on the flip side right here, the commercial revenue is what is continuing to grow. And specifically looking at international commercial revenue right here has increase 16% year-over-year. What this tells me, just from an actual client perspective, is that Palantir is really diversifying the different industries within the commercial contractual business. And in terms of the governmental contracts, which they've said, even Palantir CEOs that said that can be choppy in nature in terms of this can cause large fluctuations of revenue. I think this is great for Palantir to really get their feet wet with many different companies. And we've seen this looking at the different types of companies that they have recently collaborated with. And recently they just celebrated the renewal of that partnership with UniCredit right here. And remember back in October, they talked about their collaboration with PwC. And also they had that partnership with Palanitr. So in the last few weeks, we've seen a lot of major partnerships that have really been brought out to the public space for Palantir. And this shows you that they really are working on increasing their commercial revenue and also their commercial customer growth. Now, talking about that, one thing I think that is really bullish into 2024 is their profitability right here. And with the record gross profit in Q3, this was $450 million, up 22% year over year. So talking about this is a gross margin of 81%. And this is where Palantir really, I think, takes the leading edge from other types of stocks out there, is that they are profitable and they've really maintained this great gross profit that is continuing to increase. You can see here at a nice linear slope. And also this gross margin percentage in terms of profit is continuing to stay relatively stable, which is important because Palantir has a lot of cash on hand in terms of their actual health and financial health right here, that their balance sheet is continuing to increase. Right now they have $3.3 billion on cash in short-term investments and debt of only $0.2 billion. So very, very small compared to the amount of cash that they do have at hand. This basically allows us to make the consensus that Palantir has a large safety net in terms of cash reserves, A, and B, they have a lot of cash that they can put into available resources, research, and development to further develop their AI softwares and to offer the best technological AI data products and keeps them ahead of the game. Remember, Palantir has only been publicly traded for the last 3 years. They've been in the actual game for over 20 years. So with the amount of free cash flow that they have on hand in terms of their margin, their balance health sheet is looking very healthy. And that talks about the outlook into Q4. Talking about here the Q4 revenue expectations, their basically earnings will be set to report here in next February is at $601 million. And this is still beating analysts in terms of guidance that has been raised. And one important thing that we have seen, which has been a reason why Palantir has been ranked as the number one strong buy in the Zacks rank, is the earnings per share revisions that we've already had in the last 90 days. And we've already had 9 bullish revisions in terms of analysts that keep continuing to push Palantir to set them to a higher standard for them to hit a higher bar in terms of earnings per share and revenue metrics. And this basically next quarter earnings shows, or their analysts in their predictions shows right here, an acceleration from the Q3 revenue report, which already accelerated and caused kind of this exponential reversal influx into Palantir's valuation. And looking at that and talking about that, the guidance has been continuing to raise as management raised their fiscal year of 2023 guidance. So in total, what you're seeing right here is the AIP bootcamps are really having a strong, I want to say positive impact on the company. Now, let's quickly talk about the bearish perspective of the last kind of minute of this video, and that is the valuation. This is one of the biggest criticism right here, that Palantir is not cheap. In terms of right here, their actual price to earnings ratio, the forward 1 year earnings ratio is at 60.85. And talking about that compared to their revenues is at 13.13. So Palantir does trade at a very high valuation. However, I think Palantir has really always traded at a very high valuation, and so have many other tech stocks. This does show you that investors right now are willing to pay a high premium because they do think Palantir will continue to grow, number one, and will eventually grow into their valuation as this company continues to actual mature. Now, one of the other biggest risks that we do see right here is the actual growth slowdown. And that's because Palantir back in the day basically said that, hey, they are going to predict a 30% year-over-year growth. What we've seen is a reduction in that coming down to like 16, 17%. And people saying here, this decelerated, revenue growth, does this mean that the company is not growing as fast as they once anticipated? I don't necessarily think this is a bad thing. I think Palantir has shown in terms of the actual benefits versus the risk that they do have associated with them, they have lots of great things going for them. And maturity within a company can be a reason why we see this decelerated, like I said, revenue growth rate. Are they past their hyper growth rate? But that doesn't necessarily mean that this isn't a bad long-term stock for the next decade. I want to know what you guys think. I think Data Dispatch, we're remaining bullish on Palantir 2024, unless, of course, there was some crazy major changes all of a sudden out of nowhere. But right now, staying bullish. But, of course, do your own research before making your own decision. Peace out. Take care. You guys have a great weekend.